author of Say It Now, which is 33 creative ways to say I love you to the most important people in your life. And I am very happy to welcome our guest authors. We have Kim, we have Jean, and we have Stephen. Oh, and look, there's Brenda. Wow, Brenda, where is that behind you? Oh, she's muted.
Hi, Brenda.
Oh, she's still connecting to audio. Oh, and she's also, I think, on the phone, isn't she? Looks like it. So to start us off today, our wonderful author, Kim, is going to have a little bit of a meditation for us. Kim, you wanna start us?
Sure. So I think it's a great idea anytime you're settling into anything where you want to be fully present, just to pay attention to your breathing for a minute or two. So I like to invite people to take a few nice, deep, slow breaths, and we'll just release a little bit of tension from a couple of our tension areas, and then just follow that breathing for a minute or so. And then we can jump in and we'll be all tapped in. So let's take a nice, deep, full breath. And as you inhale, fill your belly, really inhale deeply and feel everything expand. And as you exhale, make sure you're exhaling fully and completely each time. Keep breathing just a little more deeply than you normally breathe. And see if you can extend each exhale just a little bit. There's some research that shows that if we extend the exhale just a little bit, it helps us relax. So on your next inhale, I'm going to invite you to notice the muscles of your face as you inhale. And as you exhale, completely release all the muscles of your face and make sure there's space between your teeth. Keep breathing just a little more deeply than you normally breathe. Slowing everything down. And on your next inhale, I would invite you just to notice your shoulders. And as you exhale, release those shoulders a little bit. And then one more nice inhale into the belly. Notice the belly expand. And then as you exhale, release any tension you're holding in your midsection. And now let's just mentally track our breath, just for a breath or two, just for a few seconds. Just follow that breath on the rise and the fall. And when you're able to breathe on purpose and notice that breathing, this is presence. So now that we're all present and tapped in, off we go.
Thank you, Kim. Jean?
Nice.
It's here and links us at the heart level.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you both. What a beautiful way to start this group. And what a great reminder how simple it can be to come back to the moment, to transition from one thing to another in such a beautiful way with simply paying attention to our breath. So thank you. And welcome everyone to our Mango Publishing author panel. And we're going to start off by having our three guest authors introduce themselves and just tell us, hold up your book, tell us the name of your book and the subtitle, where you're from, and also something you've been doing to really take care of yourself during this challenging time. So Kim, why don't we start with you?
Okay. My book is Mindfulness for Warriors, Empowering First Responders to Reduce Stress and Build Resilience. And I and a team of 6 trainers that are all military veterans, first responders. We are teaching first responders and others about meditation and mindfulness, and we offer resilience training. So we're bringing some fairly leading edge training to these populations, and they are, especially now, embracing it with all kinds of enthusiasm, as you can imagine. I think the best self-care piece for me, and the one that I share with my kids and my students and anyone who will listen to me, is really just the very simple importance of using the breath as a natural stress reliever, and how the breath can direct you to the present moment and sort of pull your mental faculties in so that you can be more present in each moment of your life. And I find myself doing that in these times. So if I notice any anxiety, fear about the future, or anything that makes me feel unwell, I do try to shift my awareness to my breathing. And sometimes I'll ask myself, I'll think, how many breaths will it take me until I feel a bit of relief here? Yeah, so the breathing is just such a simple, it's so simple that I think people overlook it sometimes as a coping mechanism, and really a mechanism to bring you into the present moment.
I love that, Kim. Just as you were saying that, I was thinking the same thing, that it's so simple and we don't need anything outside of ourselves to have that, which is what makes it such a beautiful practice and tool. And particularly, of course, for the people that you're working with, the first responders, I can imagine, but really for any of us, because often that anxiety can come in and nobody even needs to know that we're practicing with our breath when we're doing it. So I so appreciate that. Thank you. And thanks for leading us in an example so that we could all actually practice it today.
Sure.
Yeah. So Jean, you're next to Kim on my screen. How about, would you like to introduce yourself?
First, a comment about Kim.
Sure.
Yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, but crisis arises in everybody's life. And we have to show up at something that's hard. And so what you suggest to first responders for this major pandemic, we will be first responders at many different events that are very personal. So I just wanted to comment on appreciating that we are all first responders in our personal life to crises within families and our organizations and things like that. Well, I'm Jean Shinoda Bolen. The Shinoda represents the Japanese ethnicity. And the MD that's usually at the end of my name represents that I'm started out as I'm a physician, a psychiatrist, a Jungian analyst, a clinical faculty person, a person who's been around the block quite a bit. And involved in a lot of feminist activists. So that on my website says analyst, author, and activist. And it is in my activist mode that many of my books have been written. And I live in Mill Valley, California, among the trees, up on the side of Mount Tamalpais, and have a great sense of gratitude that it is so beautiful around. And so to be sheltered in place to do my practice virtually makes me wonder well, what do I need an office for? It really works quite well on FaceTime. So gratitude is part of what sheltering in place does, knowing that now I think it's 80,000 deaths. Well, anyway, I am a new Mango author that is having several of my books republished, and the one that speaks to these times is called Like a Tree, How Trees, Women, and Tree People Can Save the Planet. And it was sort of felt like a bit of an orphaned book because I usually am out there talking about circles or archetypes. But this one, synchronistically, people are wanting me to talk about, including Mango, chose it as the first book that they will republish. And to speak about women and trees being the answer to this liminal time where we are sheltering and stopped the climate change that was going to be inevitable. So it's a fascinating time to be here because things are going to get better or not. And meanwhile, it's a very high cost in terms of deaths, in terms of poverty, in terms of people being ill. But there's also a real possibility of major changes in our values. So that's unchecked.
What about how are you taking care of yourself in the midst of this?
Well, I live in such a beautiful part of the world, and part of it is gratitude. Part of it is that I get out and walk around because there are paths here. And part of it is that I'm introverted, so that blessed solitude serves me well.
Well, and from the looks of it, you have a beautiful place to be in solitude. It just looks gorgeous behind you. The sun is coming in. It's lovely. Thank you, Jean. Thank you. Stephen, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay, let me unmute. So my name is Stephen Post. I'm in Stony Brook, New York at School of Medicine here. And I have a book I will hold up called God and Love on Route 80, The Hidden Meaning of Human Connectedness, with a foreword by Larry Dossey. And this is a book about synchronicity and about journey in life and about perfect interactions that seem too wonderful not to be somehow set up by a universal consciousness. So that's basically what it's about. And it starts in adolescence with a dream I had when I was about 15 in New Hampshire. And then it carries on through life. And it's really a series of episodes of synchronicity, roughly a dozen or so, culminating in filling the United Nations a few years ago with young people who were prize-winning essayists writing about how they, on a deep level, push back against pressures from peers to hate others simply because they didn't share their beliefs. So it's a journey style book, and it was fun to write it, and I'm happy it's out, and I thank Mango for being so helpful in the process. And Brenda.
Hi, Brenda. Now we can say hi to you because
hello. Hi.
Brenda is the associate publisher at Mango Publishing, and also Robin is here and Debbie. So we have 3 people from our publishing house, and we thank you.
Robin. Oh. Okay. And Debbie, you're okay. Hi, Debbie.
Yeah. Okay. Isn't it fun? I know. So Stephen, how have you been taking care of yourself during this time?
Well, I haven't been staying home too much, although I suppose you're supposed to, but I'm actually running a clinical ethics consultation service here, and Stony Brook is a little bit of a hotbed for the COVID-19 problem. It's been in a lot of news cycles and so forth.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have to talk with family members, although they can't be on the premises, but sometimes by Zoom and sometimes by phone. And sometimes through a liaison, about sudden onset decisions that they need to make about a loved one who is up in the intensive care unit. And the questions are, is it time to do a DNR, or should there be other decisions made that would be more compassionate than simply carrying forward with a lot of heavy technology. And I actually do find it peaceful, because I like doing it, and I've been doing it for a long, long time in a lot of different places. So it's good to be able to allow people to have a perspective, and maybe shift their thinking a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, so I'm projecting that perhaps one of the ways you're taking care of yourself is actually by doing your work in the world. Is that?
Well, yeah. So I've always been a proponent of, it's good to be good. Good things happen if you help others. You get your mind off the self and the problems of the self, and you discover a great inner freedom in that process. And so I believe in the giver's glow, or whatever you want to call it. And I think it's very important in managing through difficult times.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Did you say the giver's glow?
Yes, I did.
Ah, that's beautiful. I've not heard that, but I love that. The giver's glow.
Yeah. Well, you're a glow. You glow. You look glowy.
She's a giver. She is a giver.
Yeah, you are definitely a glower. It's your mesolimbic pathway, and it's, happiness chemicals, and it's all the things that happen when you get away from the self and you simply extend to others. And there's a whole biology of care and connection, and you exude it. So I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Oxytocin.
Well, oxytocin, dopamine, lots of different things going on, and people are figuring it out a little bit at a time. But there's a natural human state is not self-reliance, it's interdependence, and it's caring for others as we are cared for. And when we move into that zone, we engage a kind of biology that is good for your happiness and your health and even your longevity.
Wow. And I think, Stephen, that really speaks to one of the things that I love so much about Mango Publishing, right, is that I feel as if it's a community of authors and everyone who supports the authors who really care, right? It does feel to me, and I don't know if Brenda or Debbie or Robin, you want to speak to this, since it just sort of naturally came up, but there does seem to me to be this really beautiful connection.
Yeah, I definitely sense it. And I love these Wednesday Heart Wisdom panels, because more people get to be connected. And I think it takes on a life of its own. But I was just also reflecting upon something Stephen said, which is about the natural human state is interdependence. And I feel like we're all getting a really major reminder of that right now.
Yeah.
I mean, we think we're much more independent than we are, but when a child comes into the world, it's total dependence for a long time. And when you fall ill, it's dependence. When you grow old, it's dependence. Interdependence is not something to be embarrassed by, but it really is something to realize and cultivate and not be bashful about. So I think it's the key of this experience for me is just realizing, I mean, it's physical isolation, but it hasn't been social isolation, because I've been getting Zoomed every day, 10 hours a day with medical students, connecting with them in all kinds of ways that I could never have imagined. I get phone calls from old friends. So it's actually, it's not really social distancing. It's for the first time in a long time, it's reconnecting.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. That's so true. And even this, right? So these panels came directly from this pandemic starting, and Brenda and I talking and deciding we wanted to bring the wisdom of our community out. And so, yeah, Well, let's hear from Kim. Do you have anything like we can turn to your book if you'd like and see if there's anything that you wanted to bring into the conversation today.
Oh, I was just really enjoying that. I'm deep in thought here around this conversation, because I've talked a lot to my adult kids who can't see very much now, and some of my friends, about how much we really are pack animals and how important it is for us to be together. And anyway, something from my book. Well, to Jean's point, I have a lot of heart and passion for working with first responders, because I'm the widow of a first responder who died by suicide. So that's why I want to work with these populations specifically in terms of resilience. But I'm thinking a lot about what Jean said about each one of us being first responders in our own lives. And I mean, my entire work is about talking to these first responders about the crises they've dealt with to this point, and the crises they continue to deal with all day, every day in their career. And we also talk about adverse childhood experiences and past crises that they kind of drag into their profession and their here and now. And after Jean said what she said, I thought, man, that is so true. In one way or another, we are all first responders. And I'm kind of babbling here now because I'm thinking about
You're not babbling at all. You're not.
What the other two authors have said. But absolutely, even after Jean said that, I was thinking about when my own husband died and how I applied the principles that I teach just so I could survive that time. Anyway, and I find, they're my topics for sure, but I do find mindful practices and a daily practice of meditation, which enhances and promotes mindfulness, and a never-ending attention to the breath. I just find that crucially important for every human being on the planet for self-regulation. I know a lot of people right now that are in really bad positions and very, very scared about the future. And if all you can do is somewhat regulate yourself mentally and emotionally for that little pocket of relief so you can continue to breathe. Yeah.
The breath business is actually what we have in common with the trees. I mean, the whole idea of the planet and what we were doing to bring in global warming and do in the planet, except that the planet will not be done in by us. There's been an interesting description of we are to the planet the way the coronavirus is to humanity. That the unconsciousness of the virus and our unconsciousness about what we are doing when we are treating nature and trees as if they are just so many lumber, a product, and women. For trees and women, I've made a point about trees and women are treated by patriarchy in much the same way, as to be used, valued for appearance, cut down, treated like so much stuff. And the trees, the more we cut down of trees, the more humanity is suffering, because the trees breathe out the oxygen we breathe in, and we breathe out the carbon dioxide that they sequester. And so to just keep cutting down the rainforests and the Amazon forests and all that is so unconscious. So the sense of being one with nature, which I think is happening to a lot of people when you wander outside. Well, you can wander through nature and be 6 feet apart, which means that you can meditate, you can think, you could feel, you could actually notice. I mean, I'm right over the hill from your woods, and one of the things I often experience is I go down early in the morning, people come along, and they're talking while they're amongst these magnificent trees and not sensing the presence of the energy around them and not having a sense of the sacredness. I mean, one of my favorite places in your woods is called Cathedral Grove, because the attitude of humility, of appreciating beauty, which is a human experience, you have to slow down to do this. And I like that all of the authors have a connection with matters spiritual. And I also, when Stephen talked about his book having to do with synchronicity, I thought about my first book was called The Tao of Psychology, Synchronicity in the Self, and it was published in 1979, and synchronicity could not be included in the title because it was too esoteric. And then along came Sting and his platinum albums, and suddenly synchronicity has entered the language, which is wonderful.
Hey, Jean, I just wanted to give you a personal little note. I got kicked out of church camp when I was 10 because, like, the counselor, because I told the counselor that I talked to trees, and she sent me home with my mom and a note saying that, like, they thought that I needed a good talking to so that I came back to reality. I just thought you would think that was funny.
I would think that was sad, actually.
Well, I actually was happy to be kicked out of church camp because that gave me more time to read.
Brenda, I have a question. Do you still talk to trees?
Oh, yeah.
Yay! Tell us a little bit about talking to trees.
Well, I grew up on a farm, and there was lots of trees. I mean, like, this is in West Virginia, right in the Ohio River Valley. And so there was like a whole grove of walnut trees and sycamores and oaks and just such beautiful trees. And my favorites were like weeping willows and weeping birches. I just thought they were so beautiful. And so, like, I felt they had a presence. I mean, even as a child. And so I would go, like, sit down under the tree and just sort of connect with my back to the trunk of the tree and just sort of hang out. And I felt like there was a live thing and that we were communing.
Oh, there's some research about people who are meditators leaning against a tree and breathing at a certain pace and watching, however you measure this, the sap in trees, getting in sync with the breathing of the person. I think I put it in like a tree. It was but I'm not actually sure, absolutely sure it's in there. Because I did write it a decade ago, and I got reacquainted because so many people have been interested in trees right now during this pandemic thing. So suddenly it's like remembering how I got involved with knowing about trees, which since I was a pre-med, I didn't study botany. I started physiology and anatomy and all kinds of things, but not about botany and trees. And so when the tree in front of my house was cut down after I tried to be an activist for over a year from the Homeowners Association, the neighbor wanted it down because it interfered with the view on one side of her house. And it was a gorgeous Monterey pine. And I lost the vote about, the tree was voted down because it's inflammable. It was made into a danger, this Monterey pine tree. So short of tying myself to the tree and making a spectacle of myself, I'd done everything else short of that. And then I went to the UN where I was and am doing a lot of activism. And I was I came knowing that when I returned home, it would be cut down. And so I was talking to Gloria Steinem about the saga of the tree. And she said, remember, Jean, you are a writer. You can have the last word. And that inspired the writing of this book.
Yay! Oh, that's beautiful, Jean. Oh.
And I really learned about trees in order to get into it. And the more I got into my understanding about trees and what they really do and how wonderful they are, the more I got over being wounded and angry as I looked at the big stump cut down as I went out the front door every time.
Well,
and it got transformed through writing, through learning, through getting this book done and having its launch in Muir Woods.
Wow.
The mental health side of being close to trees and nature is very well established. So, for example, Olmsted, who designed Central Park, spent the last 5 years of his life as a resident at McLean Asylum in Boston. And he had schizoid issues all of his life. But he always knew that when he was close to nature, the green of the grass, but the beauty of the trees, that he felt better. And so he wrote a wonderful little essay about why he designed Central Park. And designed it because he wanted millions of New Yorkers over the years to be able to get into nature and to be soothed by nature. And I always think to myself, you know, when everybody's trailing through Central Park, do they realize that a man who was somewhat struggling with schizoid disorders created that so that they could be healthy? And all the sister asylums in Philadelphia, and you know, they all had sweeping hills because the idea was if you could be in nature, if you could be baling the hay, if you could be out there at the chicken coop, you would be away from technology and you'd be close to your essence. And so there's that's actually how American psychiatry got started in Philadelphia with the Philadelphia Asylum. These were Quakers like Thomas Scattergood, who really had a close relationship with nature and with one another and had an internal mysticism. And that's really where it got started.
Wow.
I'm really interested in your book, Jean, because before my work with first responders, I did many one-day kind of spiritual retreats with people, professional people and people from all walks of life. And I would always have every class take off their shoes and socks at some point during the class, and we would go out and get our feet on the earth and have them just feel that. And I literally had them hug trees. And so some of them, of course, thought it was, I mean, they were like, what have I gotten myself into? But I did a 3-day intense kind of soul retrieval retreat with a Native American and learned about tree people. And we did a lot of work in an Oregon forest with tree. And so I learned a lot and experienced it, you know, myself. So I sort of integrated that into some of my work with, you know, stressed out professionals. And not ironically, one of their favorite parts of the one-day retreats was bare feet on the earth and literally hugging trees. Yeah.
Good.
You know, I would like to put out a challenge to everybody who's here today that after this is over, we can't do it right now or we'll all have to leave our wonderful call, but after this is over, let's all go be barefoot and hug a tree. Is everybody up for that?
I'm in.
Yeah.
Everybody in? I mean it. I'm going to follow up with all of you. Now, I love that. And I really, I so appreciate, and I know, you know, Brenda and Robin and Debbie are here for each of these, so they know, but it's like, it's so fascinating to me, the different directions that these panels take, right? And it's so beautiful today. Oh, Nita, did you really? Will you put on your mic and tell us? That's beautiful.
That's one of the things I do sometimes when I run is I'll stop. The picture behind me is actually a little ravine that's about maybe half a mile from my house, and I tend to run through it every time I run. And today when I did, I stopped and took off my shoes and just walked around. And then there's this one tree that I just adore, and I always, even if I have shoes on, I always hug it just because it's one of my closest friends. Yeah, I'm really into this today. So.
I'm looking at Brenda in her Hobbit role, and I'm thinking that Sam was a gardener.
Yes.
And
Sam
again,
Gamgee.
yeah, absolutely. And he's the one who can come back to the Shire because he's grounded in nature, he's grounded in the earth, he can do his gardening, he can marry and have a couple of kids, but Frodo was never into the gardening thing. He was never into the earth so much. So he has to go off with the elves wafting across the sea to we don't know where. But there's a lot of literature about people who find peace and a kind of harmony within themselves as gardeners and as people who love nature.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm wondering. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, just think with when we see pictures of Mother Earth from outer space now, that pollution haze over the major cities is dissipating. And there are people in India who are on the flat part of India and can see the Himalayas for the first time. So the sense of, when I think about when I went to Girl Scout camp and church camps, the spiritual element of being out under the stars and under the trees and being part of this magnificent, beautiful universe, being a strong spiritual thread that has been through all my life. And the whole Jungian psychology idea is that the ego is in relationship to something that Jung called the large S self, but you can call it, as people have called it, by its various God names, goddess names, Tao, all that is, higher power, whatever it is. Human beings, from the time we used to draw things on caves, seem to have a deep sense of reverence. And this spiritual thread seems to be running through all the authors that you put here.
I know, it was just synchronistic how it all happened. You just drew your names from a hat. It was crazy. But I do, and I'm also struck, I hosted a call yesterday for Mother's Day, and we were sort of looking at, especially mothers who might be having a really hard time on Mother's Day. And afterwards, someone wrote to me and said, you know what, we forgot Mother Earth when we were having our conversation. And I thought that was so beautiful. And it goes back to what you were saying, Jean, that she's put up with a lot, right? And one of my favorite funny, humorous things about the pandemic is when it first started, a lot of people were saying, you know, it was like Mother Earth said, you know, now go to your rooms and think about what you've done, you know? And I loved that because it brought some humor, which we really need, but also some truth, right? Like, and so it's beautiful that we're sort of having all of this conversation, and I can't help but think, you know, Mother's Day is coming up, and yeah, let's bring Mother Earth into this, you know.
One of the books that I've written is called Urgent Message for Mother, Gather the Women, Save the World. And it starts off with the first real Mother's Day proclamation, which was right after a war. And it was a calling for all the mothers to come together in the name of peace.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, pacifism to save because they didn't want to send their sons off to die.
Well, now I'm thinking of the 13 indigenous grandmothers.
Right.
Just keeps expanding.
Will you say a little about that, Kim?
The 13 indigenous grandmothers, it's just a group of women from around the globe, literal grandmothers, who are peace activists. They sometimes, when there are natural disasters, or they'll all converge on the area and pray, and it's just really interesting. Women.
I've met them, and because I have been around a bit,
Wow.
And they are from all over the world, and maybe one of the youngest one is probably by now in her mid-70s, and she's in New Mexico. And the idea of the indigenous grandmothers comes from the model on which the U.S. Constitution was originally written, only they left the grandmothers out, because in the original Iroquois Confederacy Seneca Nations model that the founders of the Constitutional Convention drew from was a balance of power. Only on the very top, in the sense of non-hierarchical, but in the sense of there was a circle of grandmothers who were voted in, and they had the decision to make, which was what were the priorities for the tribe. Even if it involved going to war, they would have to decide that they were going to go to war because of whatever. But I mean, the major decision was made by them, and then the Council of Men, who were by and large younger and were nominated by the grandmothers. I mean, imagine if our leaders were chosen by women who knew our political leaders from the time they were boys and knew their character. Well, imagine what leaders we would have if the Council of Grandmothers chose the Council of Men. Wow.
Yes.
And so the indigenous 13 grandmothers carry that sense that they are wise, that they've lived long enough, that they know what's really important.
Mm. Stephen, I feel compelled to invite you back into the conversation. I just realized you are the only man we have here in our group right now. And I was just curious if anything was coming up for you that you wanted to share in this conversation.
Well, I appreciate everybody, and I love the conversation. I have really had the great honor in life of co-founding with 4 or 5 other people a therapeutic farm community in in eastern Ohio called Hopewell. It's hopewell.cc. And with a famous woman in Cleveland whose son had gone to Princeton, and then he'd gone to work in New York, and he had a schizophrenic episode, came back to Cleveland. This is Clara Rankin. She's public about it. She's 105. She's a Christian Scientist. She never goes to doctors. So we bought a farm, a 350-acre farm from the Amish farmers. And it's a beautiful thing now. There are people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and they live there for a 6-month period. It's all covered by insurance and philanthropy. They have responsibilities in the community. You know, they're taking care of the horses and they're taking care of the cows, and they do all kinds of arts and crafts. They have positive psychology small groups. So they spend a week talking about gratitude and figuring out how to be grateful. And then they'll spend a week on forgiveness and a week on kindness. And so Hopewell was the second one in the country, but the first one that used positive psychology. And now there's actually a national organization, and there are about 87 of these places around the United States, mainly on the East Coast, but also on the West Coast. And it's just, part of it is being close to nature. So you don't have access to computers, you don't have cell phones, you're separated from all that, and you're interacting with one another. There's a lot of kind of meditational technique that goes on. They do have a psychiatrist from the Cleveland Clinic who comes in every couple of weeks and will give medication, but the medications are about a fifth of what they'd normally be, because people really are connected with one another and with their communities. And so hopewell.cc is a fabulous place. I send students there out on Route 80. They have to drive west on Route 80 and they have to get to Hopewell. And they spend a couple of weeks and they just love it. But it's the way it's situated in nature that's so powerful and that makes so much of a difference. So I love the conversation. I think it's very important. And I think you're exactly right about grandmothers.
Nita, I saw you sort of exclaim when he mentioned that. Did you have a connection?
Well, I just have heard of it. That's all. I just was like, oh, you know, every once in a while, I tend to think that everybody's in California, which they're not, you know, so it was just like, oh, so yeah, sorry. I have a strong startle response, but yeah.
It was just fun to see you respond.
Sorry.
Yeah, don't be sorry. That was awesome. So I'm curious.
What the entrance to Hopewell looks like. It's just this big, gorgeous spread, and it's very effective. You know, actually, people are getting better.
I can understand why. I
You know,
really can understand why they are getting better.
Yeah.
I'm just going to open it up and see if anybody who's here participating had any questions or wanted to contribute to the conversation, just to open it up for a minute to anybody who wanted to join in. You had something. And I think if you wanted to unmute, Debbie, can people unmute themselves or do we have to do it?
We can do it.
Everyone can unmute themselves.
Okay, yeah, did anyone want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll just, real quick, I just wanted to say that I have been seeing, I can't remember, I just saw an article recently, it was in another country, where they're recommending, because people have to social distance, that you hug trees to get that sense of, you know, surrounding that thing, whatever the thing is that we get from hugging. And so that was sort of part of why, I mean, I kind of been doing that for a long time, but I was reminded by it. And I think Brenda posted it, maybe the same article or a different article about the same thing, where there's something, you know, in addition to the things that have been talked about, there's something very physical about, like emotionally physical, not just the breathing thing, but emotionally about that, like having something against your chest and wrapping your arms around it. And so I just thought that was interesting.
I'm glad you brought that up, Nita. I would love to see that article. We'll have to, maybe
I'll see if I can find it. I'll see if I can find one. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we could post it on the Mango Facebook page, because that sounds beautiful. And I really appreciate that idea of like what you're saying about it being emotionally physical too.
Yeah, it's not the same, obviously, but you know, it just, right now we have to come up with alternative ways to do a lot of things. So
I find I'm hugging, well, I always hug my cats a lot, but
yeah,
they're really good for a good squeeze.
Well, and my husband was really sick for a while. He's doing much better. But when he first came home from the hospital, he was so frail that I had to touch him because I was doing home health care, but it's only been the last week really where I could get any kind of physical connection with him. And I just realized, wow, I know a lot of people that live alone or, you know, just, so I felt a lot of gratitude to have that again, because it's not that I took it for granted, but, you know, it's like when anything's gone, then suddenly you have a new perspective. So I had a different perspective. So.
Yeah. Well, Nita, while you're unmuted too, since you are a Mango author, do you want to share the name, which you know I love the name of your book so much?
Oh, hang on one second. Because I have it right here. Oh, I got the virtual thing. I'm not sure how it worked.
Hey, there it is. There it is.
Yeah, okay. So my title is Depression Hates a Moving Target, How Running with My Dog Brought Me Back from the Brink. And it's a running and mental health memoir. And it's a story about using exercise, specifically running long distances, very, very slowly. How I use that to manage my mental health issues. And there is a mindfulness component too, which is, I actually had a connection with Kim because of the mindfulness issue, because I do practice mindfulness as part of my running. And then there's also a nature component, because my preferred place to run is outdoors. I have kind of a wonky ankle, so I can't do trails, because I think I would, if I didn't have the wonky ankle, I'd be a trail runner. But I have to run on paved surfaces, but they're usually in the woods along the rivers. And that's been the biggest, probably the biggest change for me, is I can run in my neighborhood, which is lovely, but I'm used to running with a group. on these long runs along the Olentangy and Scioto rivers here in Columbus. So, but I'm just loving this conversation about the women and about the trees and about, you know, taking back Mother Earth, and it's just really powerful. So thank you for
I know
letting
the
me.
Olentangy River.
You do?
Yeah,
Yay.
I do.
It's a lovely place.
It is, yeah, it is.
Well, I wanted to express gratitude for everything that everyone is saying. I'm not an author, but I read books. And
Yay!
a lot of what you guys are talking about really resonates with me, and especially the point that Jean made, like, if you slow down enough, like in some ways, you know, the pandemic has been awful, but in some days it's been a real gift of an opportunity for me, because I do find myself slowing down my breathing, slowing down to actually look at the trees. My friends and I have been sending each other pictures of just nature from the morning walks. And also, when I am in that still place, then I can see like how different things, you know, like the synchronicity of life just coming up and little surprises. So it's just been a real pleasure to listen to all of you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. And I love your panda behind you.
Hi.
Well, I teach preschool, and also I was thinking about what you said, Kim, with self-regulation, because a lot of what we do is trying to model for the kids to self-regulate, and a lot is, you know, take a big breath with me. But one of the most important things we learned as teachers is that, you know, you have to self-regulate yourself first before you can teach the kids. You can't come at them like, you know. So really interesting ideas.
Anything coming up for anyone else around? I love the organic twists and turns of where this conversation has gone. And maybe, you know, a question just came up for me for our authors on the panel is if any practices other than the ones we've talked about are dropping in for you, of maybe ways for people who aren't used to slowing down, or people who maybe aren't used to even being out in nature. If you have any tools or tips or practices for people who will be listening to the replay about that.
Well, I have somebody in my life who has a very difficult time being home, staying home, and slowing down. Yeah. Very difficult time. And so I just have gently suggested that she try to sit with and feel into and think into, why do I have such a difficult time being home, still, quiet, no activities? What comes up for me? How does that feel? How do I feel? And try to identify, is it loneliness? Is it whatever it is? And, you know, to just kind of be with that and see if there could be some discovery you know, during this time.
Well, most people are very engaged with doing, but not being. So it sounds, Kim, like you're describing someone who needs to get back to being. Is that fair?
It's absolutely fair. And actually that is the word that we use in all of my classes with first responders and others, is trying to experience what it feels like to just be. I mean, that is the word we come back to. That's where we're headed, is the difference between thinking and going and doing and being. So for this particular individual, it is very difficult. Being is a very difficult concept. So
well, it's in so many ways.
Have they read your book?
They've been talked to and lectured and cajoled and encouraged and by me for a very long time.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Jean, what were you starting to say?
To encourage people to be a human being and not a human doing. And the importance of people finding what it is that they do when they lose track of time. And they're so absorbed in whatever they are doing or wherever they are or whoever they're with, that they lose track of time, and time either stretches out or it feels like we've only been together or I've only been doing this. It doesn't seem like a long time at all, but it went by zip. Because the importance that people have is to find out who they were meant to be based on who inside of themselves has the depth that gets absorbed in what they are doing, because it's their talent that they came into this world with to develop. But from the time they went to school and were in their families and with their partners and whatever people expected them to do and to be who they expected of them. And so that the need, especially in the second half of life, is to come back to who am I really? What is it I love? What is it that I lose track of time when I do it? Where am I when I just feel one with? You know, what is it?
Jean, that's so beautiful. And I'm a coach, and so one of the things that I pay a lot of attention to is that space, right? So when someone has that space of time, I think often, especially if someone is new to the experience of just being who they are and not doing, right? It's scary at first. It is scary. And I think that's happening a lot right now when people have time to reflect, because things come up, right? We get to see that opportunity of, wow, I've heard so many people say, I'm laid off, but I realized I didn't even really like that job. Or, people just getting to see, that the relationships that they miss the most, or, it's like, it's a time for reflection. And I think at first that can be scary, but I love that. This is partly why I love books too, right? I feel like books can lead us to that safe place of reflection and looking inside ourselves.
I mean, in terms of practices, and I love the discussion, Jean, of time and being trapped. My wife's Japanese, and the symbol for busy is a heart with a big slash through it, and it literally means no heart, because you're running around getting from point A to point B as quick as you can. It's the story of New York under most circumstances, But the shamans and the Kabbalistic rabbis, they always said the best time to meditate and pray is really early, when you just get up, because if you note, when you've just gotten up, you're not quite sure if you're awake or you're asleep. It's kind of betwixt and between. Liminal. And yeah, it is. It really is. And so if you're going to connect with this universal mind or this supreme being or whatever you want to call it, it's going to happen when you're beyond a feeling of time and beyond a feeling of place. I wake up in New York, but actually, to tell you the truth, I almost could be waking up in Cleveland, because I'm not quite sure what my moorings are, And if this divine being before time and space is eternal and creative and loving, then all these shamans have said that you have a better chance of connecting early on in the morning, before you sort of get off into your routine. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm really curious about your wisdom on that.
It makes a lot of sense. Also, when you wake up and you can remember a powerful dream you've had, and your mind is on that dream and trying to recover it. So you are not in this world. You are waking, but remembering the dream world, which symbolically speaks in a different language, but I mean, it speaks in symbols rather usually than language, but some people even have voiceover dreams so that they can remember what the point is. The dream world is amazingly rich. And if we only listen to it, we have a lot of guidance.
I love this. You guys, our time has sped by. I feel as if I want to continue sometime and go into the dream discussion. It really interests me.
I had something real quick I wanted to add on a practical level. Two things. Number one, Jean, I'm not sure if you saw in the chat that I was suggesting that we hook up with a tree planting organization for the new version of Like a Tree. Oh. So that like, you know, in the back of the book, like we partner with them so that like the book is encouraging tree planting.
There's a major movement called 1 Trillion Trees that Jane Goodall has been advocating. I haven't, so that's one far out possibility.
I think that we need to, like, every one of your books should cause the planting of at least 100 trees. So that, I just wanted to get that idea before it blew away.
Thank
and
you.
then secondly, I have given Kim's book, Mindfulness for Warriors, to a couple of first responders that I know. And I wanted to offer to send it to, if any of you know first responders, like I'll get Mango to send her book. And especially Stephen, I feel like there must be people at the medical school or the hospitals that you know that could use the book. So like, just let me know, because I mean, obviously I wanted to publish her book because I feel like it's important and meaningful, but right now I feel like it's urgent.
Sure.
To get it in.
Right, so we have really expanded, and I have a definition in the book too about what I consider to be a warrior. And it's not just first responders, but we are starting to work with nurses, social workers, other mental health professionals, clergy, and we're actually building our online education center now, and it's warrior well-being, and including all warriors, guardians, and healers, because obviously there are a lot of nurses right now that need this information. So none of this is specific to police or to fire. It's about people who have worked in that capacity. I interviewed 9 first responders in there that tell their story, and they talk about how they got on a healing path and how they maintain their healing path. So yeah, so for nurses or doctors, a lot of clergy and mental health professionals right now also are extremely stretched.
EMTs,
yes,
they're really in trouble right now.
Yes.
Everybody is. It's amazing around here. And I see a lot of these folks, and you know, the nurses they don't even live at home anymore. A lot of them don't have guest rooms at home, so and they don't want to bring their clothing in the vicinity, and so they are sleeping together in little communities in apartments along the Sunrise Highway. I mean, it's just.
So if I were to send you a case of her books, you could get it into the hands of some of these people?
Oh yeah. Well, if you sent me, a couple of dozen or a dozen or whatever, I could definitely give it meaningfully to some people who have really been through a lot.
Yes.
Sure.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Beautiful, Brenda. And
yes, thank you.
Thank you all for being here. What a great hour this was. Kim and Jean and Stephen, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to our Mango people and to our participants who joined us. I just love these Wednesdays and look forward to them. And we will have the replay up if there's anybody that you think would like it. I always put them up on the Mango Facebook page. And don't forget, barefoot and hug a tree. Nita, even if you already did it today, do it again. All right? Thank you all so much. Have a great day. Come back again next week.
Be well.
Bye-bye.